Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. We continue with our coverage of the evolving situation in Afghanistan. Here's what has happened so far. Taliban are in full control of the capital, Kabul. Former President Ashraf Ghani has fled the country, according to the spokesperson of the Russian embassy in Kabul, with bags of cash. Former Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai, chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation, Dr. Abdullah, and Hizb Islami leader Gulbuddin Hekmatyar have put together a transition council to negotiate with Taliban leadership for moving towards the next phase of political settlement. The three also left for Doha earlier today to meet with the Doha Shura. In the interim, both Karzai and Abdullah have issued statements asking Kabulis and other Afghans to not panic and wait for the results of a negotiated settlement. Both have criticized Ghani for fleeing the country. Ghani and his army also face criticism from US President Joe Biden, who called Ghani's dispensation corrupt and lacking the will to stand ground. French President Emmanuel Macron has said the EU will launch an initiative to thwart the arrivals of Afghan refugees. Let it be noted that these are the countries that want Pakistan to keep its borders open for more Afghan refugees. The Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen has said the war is over and the type of rule and the form of regime will be clear soon. Earlier today, Russian ambassador to Afghanistan, Dmitry Zenov, met a Taliban representative to discuss security for the diplomatic mission and other matters. However, a Russian foreign ministry statement says the situation in Kabul is stabilizing and that the militants have started to restore public order. On Monday, Chinese spokesperson Hua Chunying stated that, and I quote from what she said, China welcomes the Taliban's promise that they will allow no force to use the Afghan territory. She also said China hopes to be involved in Afghanistan's peace and reconciliation process and play a bigger role in future reconstruction and economic development. Pakistan's mission and staff continue to work in Kabul and have provided assistance to a number of Afghans and other foreigners desiring to leave the country. We'll get some more details on the round-the-clock work the mission staff have been doing. Pakistan is also hosting an Afghan political delegation in Islamabad as part of its efforts to facilitate a political settlement in that country. Let's dive right into our discussion. I'm joined by Amina Janjua, former Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Zamir Akram, former diplomat with long experience of bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, and Musharraf Zaidi, founder and senior fellow at the Bad Lab, an Islamabad-based think tank. Thank you to all my guests. Let me begin with Ambassador Janjua. Ambassador Janjua, let's talk about the role Pakistan is playing to facilitate a settlement and also the current role on the ground being played by the Pakistani mission in Kabul to help stranded people with visas, etc.
A lot of what Pakistan's role is in this regard in setting up of a government in Afghanistan is not Pakistan's role. It is the Taliban themselves and the Afghans who have to decide on what kind of government they want. And they have spoken about it clearly. And that is why in recent interviews, the Prime Minister has also said that it's up to the Taliban on how they want to move as far as the establishment of the government is concerned. At the same time, we have had this press release of the National Security Committee, which met yesterday, in which certain principles were identified as far as Pakistan's relationship with whoever is going to be in power in Afghanistan. Number one principle is that Pakistan desires peace and stability. Number two, Pakistan desires and would like to have an inclusive political settlement representing all ethnic groups, and this is also reflective of the political delegation that is in Pakistan, in which leaders from a number of political parties and political groups have arrived, and who we hope will have a role in what the future in dispensation in Kabul will be. Thirdly, it talks about non-interference, and that there should be a role, an emphasis on having a role for women in Afghanistan. And finally, so these are the points, these are the principles that the National Security Committee outcome document or statement says. The important thing for us is to highlight the fact that the strategic objective is to have, as far as Pakistan is concerned, is to have a stable Afghanistan that can go and proceed then on an economic stabilization program, which would be good for both Pakistan and the entire region. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, I'm quite convinced that the lesser we say, the better. Whatever's been said by the Security Council the Security Committee of Pakistan has already been said. But the most important thing is that we need to be cautious. It's a very fragile situation in Afghanistan. As far as the US is concerned, Biden is blaming the Taliban. The West is soul-searching as far as what is happening, and they're wondering what could have been done. You've already spoken about China and Russia. The Security Council has met, and let's not forget that the person occupying the seat of the Security Council for Afghanistan was a representative of the government that is left, Mr. Ghani's government, that is not there anymore. So the Taliban have to prove themselves to be worthy of this seat as well. And this is what Russia has said as well. And as far as question of recognition and other questions are concerned, they will have to be, the government in Kabul will have to be determined by their conduct. There's, I think, as far as the entire situation is concerned, the lesser we say, the better it is. And because there is no need for us to get in the middle of the internal politics in the US, which people are sort of hitting at each other. So the best thing is to stick to a few words and keep our direction straight. As well as the embassy is concerned, the embassy is open. Our consulates in Afghanistan are open, and they're providing services to whoever wants to read visas, any other kind of help that is required by Afghan nationals or internationals to come to Pakistan. So that is being done, and there are very few embassies that are open, and ours is amongst them.
Right. Let me pull in Musharraf Zaidi here. Musharraf, the TTA, which now, of course, calls itself the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, need three things. And these are not just political things, they're existential for them going forward. Legitimacy and international recognition. Money, because that's important for governance. And, of course, internal political balance. And internal political balance, especially in the non-Pashtun areas, because that balance is already tenuous. They are in control of some very heavy Tajik and heavy Uzbek areas. And Sohail Shaheen is already on record as having said more than once that we're not going to go by the old formula of monopolization or centralization because that never worked, and it's not going to work now. So there is a sense that they want to have some kind of inclusive setup. And I think one of the reasons that they have not declared victory per se, and you know they're dealing with the Transition Council is also that. Interestingly enough, and which is a very good sign, one of their delegations went to an Imam Bargah in Kabul. They were there. They assured everyone the safety and the freedom to perform their rituals. So, do you get a sense, or you see signs that their insistence on inclusivity is a recognition of these realities?
It's an important question, and I'm not sure that we're at a stage right now where we can answer it definitively, but the early signs seem to be very, very encouraging. Alhamdulillah. I say alhamdulillah for many reasons, but the most important is that the value of what the Taliban is doing in Afghanistan for violent extremists or extremists of any ilk in the rest of the Muslim world is huge. And so I think the fact that it's demonstrating this inclusivity is valuable. Not only did they go to an Imam Bargah, but they also went and engaged with the Hindu and Sikh communities in Kabul and assured them of their protection and their safety. I think those are good starting points, but it's day two. And there's a lot more that they have to do in terms of inclusivity for us to be convinced. Again, another really good sign was we've seen now demonstrable proof that Tolo News, among many other private media outlets, is broadcasting as per usual. Female anchors and reporters are on screen engaging directly with Taliban representatives and also on the streets of Kabul. I think that in and of itself is a huge confidence booster. But what happens in Kabul is one element of a wider set of data points that will only be able to make a judgment on once we have them. There's 34 provinces. It remains to be seen that the ground forces of the Taliban have the sophistication, the wisdom, and the understanding that clearly the Doha Shura and the leaders in Kabul today are demonstrating.
Right. Ambassador Akram, Ambassador Janjua talked about the UN Security Council session. She also talked about the fact that the permanent representative representing Afghanistan is someone whose government does not have a president. The president has fled. So that's one point, and I think this was a point that was raised by Ambassador Munir Akram, who's our permanent representative. But the issue that I want to raise with you has to do with the fact that after assuming the rotative presidency of the UN Security Council, India is being overtly custard. This is the second time it denied Pakistan a chance to present its case, and the second time they also denied Iran to present their case and their viewpoint on the evolving situation in Afghanistan. So give me your sense of how that can be tackled. Of course, I mean, Ambassador Akram, did a press conference and talked about these things, but it's very clear that for the next 3 weeks or so that India is there as the president, Pakistan is not going to get a chance to present its case in the UN Security Council.
Jaz, I'm not surprised at all that the Indians are acting in the way they are. We should not have expected anything better from them. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show that because of India's obstinate behavior, the debate in the Security Council is sterile. Because if you don't have one of the main players in the council meeting, the validity and the usefulness, utility of a Security Council debate on Afghanistan is that much reduced. That said, I think that Pakistan's point of view has been expressed and has been heard by the members of the Security Council and the UN General Assembly through the intercessions by our permanent representative, both through the media and through his statements that he has circulated to all the members of the Security Council. So it's not as if the Indians can prevent us from presenting our point of view, and that point of view has been amply conveyed to all concerned.
Okay. So technically speaking, and many viewers would want to understand this, how does this work? Does the president of the UN Security Council actually deny? Is this an arbitrary thing? Are there any rules and regulations under which this can be determined?
The rules of procedure require a consensus decision in the Security Council to allow a non-member of the Security Council to speak. No, in the old days, this was just a technical requirement and no one really objected. But we are increasingly seeing this kind of behavior. And this is the latest example of the Indian behavior where, because it's a consensus decision, India obviously holds up the consensus. And this is something that other Security Council members such as China have criticized, and Russia has also made certain remarks in this regard, that that keeping Pakistan out of this debate is counterproductive. But as I said, it's a consensus decision, and that's how India is able to prevent Pakistan from participating.
Right. Thank you so much. That was Ambassador Zamir Akram speaking with us. Let me get back to Ambassador Janjua. Ambassador Janjua, so the Russians are there. They haven't panicked, although they've said that they're going to cut down on some of the staff at this point in time. But they're meeting with the Taliban representatives, so the Chinese. And of course, we know that the Pakistani mission is working. What kind of scenario do you think, I mean, with reference to the Russian statements and also the Chinese statements with reference to the Taliban takeover?
The Chinese, if I may say so, have been a little more forthcoming than the Russians, and they said they would. Their statement has been a little more forthcoming, and they have said that they were ready to deepen friendly and cooperative relations. Whereas the Russians have said, it was Ambassador Zamir Kabulov, their special envoy on Afghanistan, who said yesterday, I think, where he said that they will have to look at the conduct of the Taliban, whatever dispensation is going to be in Kabul. Basically, everyone is being cautious, considering what happened in the past. They don't want to be in the middle of a situation where the issues of which have been spoken about in the UN Security Council resolution. There has also been a request to hold a session of the Human Rights, a special session of the Human Rights Council. I don't know how far that has gone. So issues of rights, etc., which will become significant. But as Musharraf Zaidi was saying earlier, the Taliban have been pretty good for now in what they are doing in Kabul and how they are going about their business. The difficulty is going to be how the field commanders react, because they are away from the center. They have been pretty disciplined and have not entered cities unless they've been told to do so. For example, in the case of Kabul as well, the Taliban soldiers did not enter Kabul till they were given direction by their leadership, because they felt that there was a security vacuum that had been created. So they have been disciplined, but being away from the center, there could be problems that could be created for the Taliban. And these are the problems that they need to closely look at and address. And these are the problems because of which, the concerns because of which Russia has said that they will have to sort of see the conduct. And Pakistan has also, in its statement, basically said that there's no military solution and that there has to be a settlement which is inclusive. And therefore, we've had leadership from Afghanistan visiting Islamabad. All these inputs will go into how we will react towards the final reaction towards Afghanistan, the government to be set up in Afghanistan. The most important thing is that, as I said, our priority is the strategic interest is that there should be stability in Afghanistan. And if there's stability, we are quite happy to work with any government that's there, in particular the Taliban, since they have proven themselves to be successful in taking over the capital as well. So yes, we have to see now. My understanding is that the leaders who came to Islamabad will now go to Doha as well. Mr. Abdullah will be in Doha as well. So they will have to patch together a settlement on an agreement that will give some kind of participation, allowing sort of focusing on inclusiveness of the other groups and other parties in Afghanistan, and also maybe also focusing on how women will participate in governance in Afghanistan as well.
Right. It does seem that, with three of these personalities, former political personalities, Dr. Abdullah, former President Hamid Karzai, as well as Hizb Islami leader and former Prime Minister Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, to have that transition council appears to be a clear indication that now there is a body which can negotiate with the Taliban. And this also meets Taliban's consistent demand during the previous unsuccessful intra-Afghan dialogue that they're prepared to talk sans Ghani and his coterie. Now, with Mr. Ghani gone, obviously, the space has opened up for further negotiations. Musharraf Zaidi, I agree with you that when you say that it's day two, and up until now, the signs are positive. But let me go back to my basic point when I asked you this question previously. This is not just a political but an existential issue. And the reason I say this is, of course, in addition to the ethnic balance and the sectarian balance, there's also the fact, and I think a lot of these Taliban leaders understand this, that there is a generation which is, for want of a better word, a digital generation. There are hundreds and thousands of girls who have been educated. They're part of the workforce. They've been working in NGOs and the rest of it. So it simply is not possible for any number of reasons, again, existential reasons, for the Taliban to do something akin to what they were doing in the 90s, which is a completely different era altogether. And I think there is a sense that while, of course, not going to be a Scandinavian system by any stretch of the imagination, it could well be something along the lines of a theocratic, a Sunni state, something that kind of reflects differences notwithstanding, something along the lines of what Iran has.
I think that there is certainly an element of pragmatism that we should expect the Taliban to demonstrate, and I think that's what we're seeing. But I would say that, the emergence of an Iran-like system in Afghanistan would then account for two countries occupying or constituting Pakistan's key borders that have a system in which the specific religious interpretation of one dominant group within a diverse country, both Iran and Afghanistan are diverse countries, Iran less so, Afghanistan more so, Pakistan even more so. And so the question of whether or not that is a good thing, I think, is a clear one for me. It is not. What Iran needs, what Afghanistan needs, although those are decisions for those countries' citizens to make, but for Pakistan, and of course there are implications in terms of our domestic discourse, but what Pakistan certainly needs is a democratic and diverse federal republic. That is what we have. It has its faults, and you and I, as many others, have been critical of those faults. But it is this superstructure of the republic that enables the negotiation of diverse life views, lifestyles, approaches to religion, both approaches to different religions and approaches to the same religion. And therefore, I think that the emergence of an Iran-like state in Afghanistan, for me as a Pakistani, and for me as a Pakistani who has a deep and abiding sense of fraternity with my Afghan sisters and brothers, I think that that is problematic. But of course, many would argue that whatever ends up being the case in Afghanistan is for the Afghans to decide. I would also say that the Afghans really haven't decided. I'm not sure they ever decided on the system they had for the last 20 years, and they certainly have not, at least democratically, by any credible methodology, have decided for the system that they have now. And those distinctions are important because when the chickens come home to roost, and we saw with the Ranjit Singh statue in Lahore today, at least one chicken coming home to roost, the omelet that is resulting from those roosts may not be very delectable.
I perfectly understand what you're saying. The choices are generally in this part of the world, as also in certain other parts of the world, are pretty stark. So very quickly, because I've run out of time and I need to go back to Ambassador Janjua also, if it's about democratic choices and stability, if that is the choice, which side of the coin would you fall for?
Well, I would say that the world, particularly Afghanistan, are multicolored. They're not black and white, and therefore I'm not sure the choice is Ashraf Ghani versus the Taliban. I think the choice is the Afghan people, the Afghan people, and the Afghan people. And of course, because it's a big country, we think of ourselves as a small country. We're a massive country, but Afghanistan's a country of almost 40 million people. By no stretch of the imagination, a small country, an extremely diverse one. And as long as the Taliban demonstrate the capacity to ensure that every Afghan citizen is able to express themselves and live their free life, then I think we won't have a problem. How they evolve their institutions is a grave responsibility now that falls on the shoulders of Habatullah Akhundzada, Mullah Baradar on the Taliban side, but particularly I think right now the three-member commission that you mentioned.
Into the three-member commission, lots of other political leaders. But let me just clarify that the Iran analogy was a very loose one. I didn't want to press it, but for want of another analogy, I thought I'll throw it in. Very quickly, Ambassador Janjua, in a couple of minutes. One breaking news that's coming in has to do with the fact that the terrorist group, the regrouped Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, has renewed its allegiance to Afghan Taliban, and it has pledged its support. This is as per the terrorist TTP spokesperson, pledging support to strengthen the Islamic Emirate in Afghanistan. Since Musharraf Zadi talked about chickens coming home to roost, I just want to get your quick view on how Pakistan is supposed to deal with this.
One of the elements that I did not say earlier in the press release that came out of the National Security Committee, the Prime Minister led, was that an assurance that the Afghan soil will be not used against anyone, and terrorists will be, let's say that terrorists will be not be undertaking activities against any other country. And this is one of the assurances that, of course, our government will seek from the Taliban once they're in place, and because this is a critical element. It is not just for us, the TTP, that we have to look at. The Chinese have the ETIM that they have to look at. The Russians and the Uzbeks have the IMU to look at. So the Taliban will have to take some very strong positions or clear positions with regard to these terrorist elements that are being allowed to exist in Afghanistan.
Right. Thank you so much. That was Ambassador Tamina Janjua. Thank you also to Musharraf Zaidi for his insights. We shall take a short break and return to discuss the terrible plight of women in India. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. Asha, a Dalit girl, was 9. She left her Delhi home to get water for the family. She did not return. According to reports in the Indian and international media, she was found dead, and later her body was forcibly cremated in an apparent move to hide the evidence. According to her mother, a priest told her that Asha had died of electrocution. Later, he told her to let the matter rest. Campaigners allege that in many cases, even the police prefer not to know. Some rights groups say that while India abolished discrimination on the basis of caste in 1948, statistics show that every day 10 Dalit or untouchable women and children are raped, and the problem is getting worse. A similar case happened in October 2020 in Hathras district of UP. A Dalit girl was gang raped and later her body cremated by the police against the wishes of her family. The case had outraged rights groups within and outside India. While South Asia as a whole has a low record when it comes to protecting women and their rights, and that includes Pakistan, India seems to lead the unfortunate trend. To discuss this further, I am joined by Dr. John Dayal, an Indian human rights and political activist. Dr. Dayal is also a member of the National Integration Council of India, and Ravi Shrivastava, a political and economic affairs commentator. Let me, before I get to my panelists, according to some later reports, the girl's parents have accused a Hindu priest and 3 others of attacking her, that's Asha, the deceased girl, when she had gone to fetch drinking water from the crematorium's cooler. And according to her mother, the gates were shut, and she was threatened when she objected to her daughter's cremation. Dr. Dayal, as I said, it's an unfortunate thing that, you know, this part of the world, South Asia as a whole, and we have had cases in Pakistan which are, which have been terrible, purely going by statistics. India seems to be leading the trend, and I find this kind of strange because India also has a very strong tradition of rights groups and you know, people agitate. There was an unfortunate rape and murder of a girl in Delhi some years ago, and you know, there were women and others, they were out and they were agitating and they were forcing the government to take action, and yet the trend seems to be moving up rather than moving down.
You know, I would not like to say that this is a coefficient of the fact that India has such a large population. I mean, that would be a very fallacious argument. Or even to say that Muslims and Christians and Dalits and tribals and women in general are getting raped, because that also would be a fallacious argument, because while the 2012 rape, which is called the Nirbhaya case, which brought about changes in the law and which got 4 people hanged because the mother and the family were so persistent, despite some of us saying that the death penalty does not solve anything, does not reduce anything. And it will be fallacious of me again and cynical to say that we told you so. But the point really is that women and children, particularly of the lowest rung of society, in caste, the Dalits, in the economic weaker sections, residents of slums and villages, in ethnicity, people in tribal areas, they do suffer sexual violence much more than the numbers would say. And India really is home to a very large number of rapists, you know. As you said, we have 88 rape cases a day in 2020, for which there is official data, which is very, very much, and maybe 35,000 or so total cases, of which almost 15% come from the Dalit community. And this is terrible. And this is only the recorded cases. You know, the cases where the police don't register it at all or falsify it or whatever. So these numbers really mean nothing. The reality is rape is a very real thing and a very painful reality for those at the bottom of India's social and economic pyramid. Over the years, laws have harshened. Penalties are now almost death if there's a Dalit victim and if a case is proved in court. But impunity, the lack of forensic sciences brought to bear on investigations, the lack of empathy in the police force itself, the total shoddy manner in which cases are brought to courts and then are dismissed. And then lastly, the court's attitude to rape. We have high courts judges, district court judges, making all sorts of crazy, what should I say, judgments and oral rulings where they give the judgments, asking in other cases for the rapist to marry the victim and so on and so forth. So the whole environment, despite the public outrage which is visible, seems to be to brush it under the carpet. And that is the sore and I must say, tearful reality.
Right. I'm going to return to you, Dr. Dayal, with a couple of other questions, but let me pull in Mr. Shrivastava here. Mr. Shrivastava, what are your thoughts about this? You know, the disadvantaged, of course, there's a trend, and it can happen to anyone. even in the upper classes. But there is certainly a trend where one can say that the disadvantaged classes, whether they are disadvantaged on the basis of caste or whether they are disadvantaged on the basis of the fact that they live in the periphery or on the basis of their religion, it does seem to me that that has an impact on how they get treated when it comes to sexual and other types of violence.
As John has amply stated about the situation in India, the fact is there is one more reason that in past such cases were buried and were not coming to light. But of late, with education and enlightenment, I think, and rights group getting stronger day by day, most of things are surfacing. Fact is that there is a complicity of the upper caste people, the police, and I would call that sometimes judiciary is also not very clear and giving all kind of erratic judgments as well. He rightly mentioned the case of Nirbhaya in 2012, 9 years before. It took almost that parent 7.5 years to fight in the courts, up to high courts, Supreme Court, lower court, everywhere to get those people punished, out of which I think one died in the jail itself. Now you have mentioned other two cases. It happened in Hathras in October 20, and you have seen the way the victim's body, the raped one, was burnt at 3 o'clock in the night. As per Hindu rituals, the bodies are not burnt after the sunset. And she was burnt at 3 o'clock in the night in the presence of the police personnel. And the police say that they got instructions from their higher-ups to finish up the whole thing in this manner. And there were a lot of hue and cry across the nation about it. It's a BJP-ruled state. I would say that the record of certain states is very, very poor in India, especially UP, MP, Rajasthan, and these are the few 4-5 states which have a decimal record as far as this, punishing this particular crime is concerned. John has also rightly said that the hanging the people, Phansi, is not the ultimate solution of this particular malaise, but the fact is that such cases, the number of the statistics which he has provided, hardly 15 to 20% ultimately get punished. And the kind of judicial processes, the time taken, the shoddy forensic analysis, the time lost after the rape and the expose, the whole thing has become such a shoddy affair that this does not reach to any conclusion. In Delhi case, Absolutely. The recent one which we are referring to, you may recall another case of Asifa, the 8-year-old girl from Bakarwal community in Jammu. She was in another heinous crime, and she was also killed and buried. Here, this girl who had gone to fetch water, and that particular priest, the pujari of the temple of the crematorium, tells the mother that, you will not get anything out of it if you go to police and all. It will be all buried and nobody will be brought to book. Such kind of either threat or coercion or cajoling, whatever he did, and he cremated the body of the girl, and there are no, physical evidences available for further investigation. So
Absolutely,
what I'm saying
and I think
that the laws.
That's one of the things that is being agitated. I'm sorry, I'm sort of fast-pacing it because I'm left with just 2-3 minutes here. Dr. Dayal, you talked about a number of factors which obviously shows that the criminal justice system itself has a major problem dealing with such cases, whether it's in terms of empathy, whether it's in terms of training, investigation, prosecution, and the rest of it. But there's also a sociological issue here. So there's a combination of the sociological factors with the lacuna in the criminal justice system.
Indeed so. In fact, they're not just parallel, they're interconnected. The lacuna arise from the sociological factors, the patriarchy, the basic fact that the raped person, the victim, is not interviewed by a woman policewoman. She is interviewed and harangued by a male cop, twice her age, 3 times her age, rooted in patriarchy. And the poor child would be totally, or even a mother, if that were the case, would be totally wouldn't even know how to respond. I've been witness, even in courts myself, as a younger reporter, that they get raped even when being tried. The way the judges interrogate them, the cross-examined by the lawyers. This requires a very comprehensive, multidimensional change. Training of police is one aspect, training of judiciary is one aspect, training of social workers and human rights activists is another. I cannot say, as an activist myself, that we have really learned how to show empathy with the victim.
Absolutely. And I think an issue that unfortunately, is a South Asian problem in many ways, not just an Indian problem. And I think, changes have to take place at multiple levels for the South Asian countries to address this problem. But thank you so much, Dr. John Dayal. Thank you also to Mr. Ravi Shrivastava. This is all from In Focus this evening. We shall see you tomorrow at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.